All right, so now we're going to jump into actually doing the rendering. Make sure that you look on Canvas, download that zip file called the rendering microphone parts, and open up the file that is named rendering example mic. There's a bunch of other files in there to make up the assembly file, which is the microphone. So go ahead and open up that, and we can jump into the rendering. All right, so we've already gone over how to do the true shading and then the edit object display to change the colors. And we can do that when we're not trying to be too precise and get a really high quality picture. We're just trying to convey a general idea. But if we want to really showcase our part, we're going to do a rendering. So we're going to come up to the top tab. We're going to come over to render. And then we have some options here. We've got Assign Visual Materials, Advanced Studio, and then Ray Trace Studio. We are going to be in Advanced Studio and assigning the visual materials. And then we have that set up. We'll go to the Ray Trace Studio. Ray Trace Studio is where you actually render your image. So we're assigning materials, making it look nice as far as the colors and the material textures and everything go. And then we're going to go to Ray Trace Studio. And that's where we spend the time, or the computer spends the time and the processing power to get a very high quality picture. Can take some time to do, so just be wary of that. But first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to Advanced Studio. So when we go to Advanced Studio, first thing that you should notice is that we are now in our perspective view. We're no longer in the parallel view. And also we have some new tabs over here. So our first one is going to be our system scenes. So just like with the true shading, we have scenes that are available to us, but these are more advanced and we have more control over them than with the true shading. So for instance, we've got Studio White 1, which is the one that we primarily use. And so we've got a floor, we've got shadows, we have a light source. If we need to change any of these things, make sure that we're in render, and then we can go to scene preferences. And this is where we have control over all of our scenes. So we can pick a scene and change just about anything in it. So we've got our background. We can choose an image. We can do a plane. We can change our lights. Whereas before we could just change between the scenes, we have a lot of control over where our light is oriented. So you can see the vector that has the light direction. So we can actually change the direction of that vector. So if we said, hey, this is a little too high, I want it to come down more on top of my part, you could angle it down a little bit more. Maybe that's too much, so we want to angle it towards back. We can change, where the light's at. It's going to change where the shadow's at and really showcase the part that we are looking to showcase. I have control over the ground visibility, the reflection. But like I said, whereas before with the true shading, we could just kind of turn this stuff on and off. Now we have control over a lot more as far as the environment and the shadows go. The scenes that are set up in NX already are pretty good. So I typically don't make any changes. I might change the background and might slightly change the lights a little bit. But for the most part, I don't really make any changes. So alongside the studio scenes, we have indoor and outdoor. These set up indoor and outdoor locations. These can be interesting. The important thing is to make sure that you get your size and orientation correct. So you don't want, if we were doing this microphone in this office, we would not want it to be this large. We also wouldn't want it to be just like oriented strangely in space. We would want it to look like it belongs on the table, like it's actually there. And so that can be kind of hard to do to get that perspective correct. We also have the outdoor ones as well, but same thing. Make sure that everything is sized correctly. So I'll just use White Studio 1. And our other tab down here is for the studio materials. There are a lot more materials available to us than we had in the true shading. And we have a lot more control over how those look. We can assign colors here in the Advanced Studio. That's totally fine. But let's go to the Assign Visual Materials tab. So you can see not really much changed. We have a new icons up here. So we have the finish. We can go straight to the Ray Trace Studio. We have system materials. That's just this right here. And then we have materials in part. That's the materials that we have selected for our part already. And then we have our decal sticker. So if you want to apply a decal, this is where you would do that. Assigning materials is pretty simple. There's a couple ways to do it. We can, let's just go to metals. We can click and drag over to the part that we want to choose for that material. And when you highlight it, just release the click. And that material is now associated with that part. Let's choose bronze, something that's easier to see the difference of. And so now that part is associated with bronze. And if we wanted to go and check that, we could go to materials and part, visual materials, and we could see that we've got bronze in our part. And we can make changes to this as well. So if I right click on this and go down to edit, this is our editing window. First thing that you want to do is go down to settings and make sure that you choose the editor level to full. You can also change this in the preferences, but I think that every time you open up NX, at least on like the computers in 2.16, it's going to go ahead and change it back to that basic. So it might not even be worth the time to do it. So I want to go change that to full, and you get more control over how this looks. So you could change the color of the bronze, and not it. You could do this to any material. So there's some materials where we will want to change the color. There's some that we won't. Bronze, we probably don't want to change the color because it's bronze. We can change the finish of it though. We can make it look more rough. We can change the sheen, how metallic it looks. There's a lot of control that we have over these, so we can really make it look exactly the way we want. We can also make it emit light. We can make it an emissive material. It wouldn't make much sense for the bronze to be emissive right now, so we are not going to turn that on, but we'll look at emissive materials here in a second. So yeah, there's a lot that we can change with this. So just because the material doesn't look exactly the way that you want when you select it, don't fret, because you can change it. We can go and cancel out of that. Then we can go back to our materials. And so I'm going to assign, so for instance, this casing, this is based off a real microphone. So the casing is, I'm pretty sure, some type of steel, but the steel that's on here does not look the way that I want. It's got this weird kind of texture to it. And the one that I found that's closest to it is this nodular ductile iron. It's got this like kind of pattern to it. Now, this is not, the material that's on here is not ductile iron. The microphone's not made out of iron, but that's what looks the closest to it. So that's what I'm going to select. So I did the click and drag again. But there's another way that we can select materials. So I'm going to do these caps. The caps, I think, are realistically made out of the same or some type of steel, but we're going to go ahead and do plastic for these. We're going to do some type of ABS. So I'm going to close back the metals, and I'm going to go to the plastics. Yeah, I think I did a matte black last time. Let's do the smooth semi-gloss plastic this time, ABS. So I'm not going to do the click and drag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and select my part, and then I'm going to come over to the materials. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit apply. That's another way that we can assign materials. And we can select multiple parts. So this mid cap and the top cap are both going to be the same semi-gloss ABS. So I clicked on both of those, and I'm going to right click, hit apply, and it's going to apply it to both of those materials. Now there's another way of doing it. So we're going to go to these metal rings. These are like some spring sheet metal, some spring steel here. And so there's a lot of them. So rather than coming through and clicking on every single one, we can go back to our assembly navigator and click on whatever component we want. So this is actually a sub-assembly. So I created one of the springs, and then I created the assembly of springs, and then I just brought in the entire sleeve assembly into the microphone assembly. So I just clicked on the sleeve assembly, which is all of these springs. We can go back to our materials. And we're going to do an anodized for this. So under the coatings, we're going to do anodized. I did blue in the image that's on canvas. We can stick with the blue if you want to. Let's go over here to the green. So I selected that part. I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to right click and hit apply. We're going to do that green. And let's say that green, it's a little too bright for us. Maybe we want a darker green. So we can again go back to our materials and part, right click on that, edit, and we can go back to our full, and then we can make our changes that we want. So we can change our color green here. Maybe more like a blue, green. We could change the finish. I want to look a little more rough. And then we can hit OK. And then for these buttons here, so this backing material, or the back of this switch, is actually just like a black cloth texture, just to protect the components in the back. And then the switch is actually connected to the button. So the switch is going to be a chrome surface, and then this back is going to be a cloth type texture. But it's one part. So we can assign a material to an entire part, just like we have been doing. We can also assign it to an individual face. And so that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to go back to the system materials. And so we said that the first part, this is going to be chrome. And rather than opening up the metals, maybe it's in the brushed metals, I'm not too sure where it's at, we can just come over here to the search bar and type in chrome. And there's our chrome, pops right up. So like I said, we can assign surfaces, faces. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold it there for a second and then release. And now I have control over what I'm actually selecting as far as what face. So I'm going to go and do that for all of these buttons, all these switches. And then the back is just going to be a black cloth texture. I'll do this and then this little lip right here as well. So if we go back to, or just reset our search. I'm going to go to the fabrics. And I'm just going to do the cotton fine weave black. Same method that we did before. I'm going to drag over. I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to release. And then I'll be able to select the faces that I want. All right. Now let's talk about the texture materials that we have. What's really cool about doing the renderings is that you can apply some like see-through materials. So like a mesh type material where it's you can see through the chain links. We can actually implement those in here. So this cylinder here is it's a solid body mesh cylinder. Well, that's the name of it. It's called mesh cylinder because it's actually going to be a mesh type texture look to it. So I'm going to go to the metals. Let's use the honeycomb grill, or I'm going to use the honeycomb grill here. And I'm just going to click and drag over to the mesh cylinder. And you can see that when we do that, that outside perimeter, so the faces turned into the honeycomb grill, but it's no longer like a solid body. I mean, it still is a solid cylinder, but the material that we've selected, we can actually see through to the other side, which I think is really neat. So we can still make changes to this material, same way that we have been doing. Materials in part, honeycomb grill, we can right click and hit edit. With this type of material though, we can control like the size of each of the honeycombs. Make sure we're in full, and we can go to the textures. This is how this is created. So we have the base, finish, emission, coating. So what NX does is it calls different images, and we'll layer these images to create the different looks. We go to the texture space. This is how we can control the size of those links. So we've got the U, V, W. Let's put in a 0. We can make that honeycomb really, really small. That's a bit much. Let's split the difference here. That looks better. You can mess around with that, play with that. You can also change the placement, change the rotation. So we want the honeycombs to be on a diagonal instead of just being straight on. We can control that. And then whenever we're done, we can just hit OK. And then down here, we have a little LED light. So this is just a LED light, tell us whether the microphone has power or not. And what's really cool is that we can actually have a material in here that is going to be emissive. So it's going to be emitting light. Now, we'll talk about later on when we go to the Ray Trace Studio, the types of quality we have. And so the emissive materials do not emit light in every single one of the quality styles that we choose. It's only the photoreal one, so the one that looks as realistic as possible. That's the one where it emits light. So it's not on every single one. But if we go to System Materials, and we go to Lights, we have some lights that we can choose from. And just like we saw earlier when we were looking at editing these materials, we can actually turn these on to emit light as well. So it's not just the lights that will emit light. Any material that we choose can emit light. But we can go to, so we've got a red LED, which is what this would be. You go to red LED, you can drag that onto there. I'll just choose the solid body. And now it looks like a red LED, which is nice, but we can actually turn this on to emit light. Well, it's already going to emit light, but we can control some things about it. Put our materials in part, edit this. We can change the color of our LED. We come down here to emission. It's emit light is turned on already. We can change the intensity of it. So we could change how bright that's going to be. We can measure whether we're in lux or lumens. So just bump that up. We can hit OK. Now we have all our materials assigned. Now we can actually go to how we are going to render this, because we've just changed the colors and sort of some of the textures right here. We could do the methods that we have before where we just take a picture, but we're actually going to be rendering this. It's going to make it look even more realistic. So we can either finish the assigned part or assigning materials to the part and then go to Raytrace Studios, or we can go straight to Raytrace Studios in the Assign Visual Materials tab. But we're going to go to Raytrace Studios. And when we open it up, it's immediately going to start rendering the image. So we see number of iterations right here, and this is increasing. So that's what's happening, is it's taking multiple iterations to increase the quality of the image. And if you just leave this going, you'll actually see it start to change. Here's where we have the different types of quality that we have. So we have fast, interactive. So, I mean, you can read about them. This one's fast. It takes the least amount of time, but you don't get as high of a quality, but it's still a decent image. Then you have quality, which is takes a little bit longer than the fast, but the image is better. And then you have photo real. Photo real is the highest quality. This is the type that you actually get the emissive materials out of. So if we go to that, now this will change and restart. And you can see that our LED is now turned on. It could be kind of hard to see just because of how this one is, but if we look at how the hole is, so that we're actually emitting light inside there, you can tell a difference. Also, you can move your part around in the Raytrace Studio, but you see how it's kind of laggy. So really the best thing to do is to get your part aligned correctly. So remember, we don't want it to be like this. We want to make sure if we have vertical lines, they are vertical, and really kind of fine tune how we want our image to look. Want it to be kind of large on the screen. So we want to do this before we go to the Raytrace Studio. It's going to make it easier because it's kind of hard to move the component around in the studio. So you can see down here, we've got like a red ring. That's the LED that's inside that little hole. But if we go to like fast, it's no longer lit up. It's just the red LED. So let's go back to photo real. And now we are rendering with that photo real. If you come over here to Raytrace Studio preferences, we can control a time limit. So we can say that I want this to be rendering for 5 minutes. You can choose your different types of formatting. You can choose that the rendering is complete for different reasons. So you can do time limit, and you can choose a time. You can choose a number of iterations that you want. And then once you have this set up, we can do timed. Let's do this can take some time. So the longer that it goes, the better the quality. So the higher number of iterations means higher quality. And you can see that this has been going behind us for 176 iterations, and it's already looking a little bit better. I will say that some of this mesh material takes a long time to actually get rendered really well, just because it's a complex image that we're looking at here. So we'll let this go for 5 minutes, and we will see how this goes. So we'll say okay on this information right now, and we can start our static image. So this starts the rendering process. I mean, the rendering process is already happening here, but this starts the preferences that we've already set in the studio preferences. So we'll click on that, and so static render is in progress, and we'll come back after the 5 minutes and see how it looks. All right, so our rendering is done. So you can see up here time limit reached, but we can still, now the number of iterations that I got to wasn't super high, so this would take a lot longer to get a really nice quality image, but that's okay for right now. So the more iterations, the higher the quality. You start to see the different textures and really the different types of materials start to show. You can kind of see on here the chrome. You can get some reflection off of that. LED is lit up. You see the textures on the casing that we put on there, and then of course the mesh background. So we can come up here and hit resume if we need to further render this. To save the image, come up next to the erase static image. We don't want to do that. We want to hit save. And like I said, we do the PNG, then we can do a transparent background, or we can just do a JPEG if we need to, and then choose where you want that to be saved to. And there is our rendering. So this is really good, again, to put into a senior project or a presentation or something like that. And then, of course, if you're trying to showcase a product, this is a great way to do that. So make sure that you submit the PNG image and submit the part that we just rendered. So this the microphone part. Just send the assembly file. You do not need to send all of the files that were in the zip folder.